coming to you live from Customer Engagement's World. And coming up shortly, Lawrence Dvorak, who is one of the people who runs this event, will be joining us on set with Johan Reed from SAP to talk more about the conversations that have been going on here today and will be going on tomorrow. But right now, we bring Volker Hildebrand back on the set, and we bring in Mary Wardley from IDC. Mary, you are a VP of CRM for IDC, correct?
That is correct.
Welcome, glad to have you here.
Thank you, I'm thrilled to be here.
So your role, what does IDC do? I know you're an analyst firm, but your role with IDC, and what about taking us right into the relevant topics about customer experience and customer journey and all that today?
Sure. So IDC is one of the oldest IT consulting and market research firms in the industry. It's just had its 50th anniversary. I've been there almost a little bit over half of that time.
Okay.
Yeah. And I follow specifically CRM applications and the broader topic of customer experience. And I purposely named it that because it's not about, to me, customer management of customer experience, the applications, et cetera. It's really a business model and it's a way of doing business. So I left it very broad. I look at CRM applications and how that's applied to the customer experience.
And that's a really, really interesting topic and fits really well. I mean, I was saying earlier that if you look at it from a tools perspective, when you want to create an exceptional customer experience, you actually need to look beyond CRM. So you've been doing a lot of research in that space as well. Can you share some of the insights of some of that research, either outcomes or things that are happening right now?
Sure, you know, it's fascinating having followed the CRM application space for about 10 years, over 10 years. It was very much about the applications before. You bought an application, you put it in, and you hoped that it enacted a change on the organization. Sort of like, if you remember Palm Pilots, you got one and you'd become organized. Not exactly. That took a little bit more participation on the part of the user. And CRM is a bit like that. And then when you go beyond that to customer experience, you can put in a call center, you can put in sales automation, you can put in marketing automation. That doesn't necessarily meet the expectations of your customer or treat them in the way they want to be treated. So the customer experience is very different. You have to almost get up from the desk, walk around and sit down again and look at it from their perspective. What happens when I go to the website? How do I feel? What am I looking at? So it's really the application. And so what I've been looking at, it's the application of the applications. What I've been looking at, and I've been doing a lot of case studies to understand what makes an organization excel at customer experience. And again, one of the first things that I've found is it's got to be driven out of the culture. If it's embedded in the culture, and that starts from the top, then it will follow through to the strategy and finally to those processes about how you treat a customer. So that's kind of one of the really important takeaways that I've come away with so far from talking to customers.
So that's great, and that's also in line with what we heard earlier, that these initiatives, when it is about the customer, it really needs to come from the top. How important is, you were talking about, it needs to be in the culture. Now that also may require, change management or whatever you want to call it. Do you have examples of maybe a company or brand that you've seen in your research that are kind of a shining example of doing this and really turning around and make their organization customer-centric?
Well, I love it that Volker from SAP asked this question, because one of my favorite examples is actually Cemex, which is a large SAP customer, so it's coincidental. But here is a very large, cement company that has won numerous awards for their customer experience because they did just as I said, got out of their chair and looked at how they deliver their product to their customers. And it's a fascinating story based on the individuals that...
Yeah, Mary, let me jump in real quickly because we had Ven Bontha on a previous episode of the Customer Edge. And folks, if you're watching this program, the community is the Customer Edge. You can search around and you can find the interview with Ven Bontha. And I remember speaking to him directly and thinking to myself, my dad grew up as a stonemason. I remember thinking to myself, how is this cement company going to do customer engagement well. But you're right, talk about them because they were really amazing in what they did.
Yeah, and Volker probably knows more of the specifics, but kind of the overall is that then, actually, it started with his wanting to put in a pool in his backyard. And he went to the bank and they just knew him instantly. They knew everything about him, and getting the loan was great. And he went back to work and said, why isn't buying cement like that? There are probably a number of reasons for that. But anyway, his boss said, you're right. I want you to come and talk to the board about it. And so he did it, and his boss said, tell the pool story. And that started them thinking about, we can change how our customers buy, how they feel about us. And they did things like put sensors in the towers, because cement is a perishable good. And, roll the clock forward, they've won several awards. But I want to add, I asked Van, so how are you regarded internally? And he said, well, sometimes people don't like to see me coming. Because they know if Ben's walking around, he's looking at their area, and there could be change. So yeah, finally got back to change management.
Right. Yeah. It's a really great story, and I know that story too. The really well I know Bota. One of the interesting things I want to add to this story is also where they were coming from, because if you think about their product, cement is cement. They had no way to differentiate themselves through, they still claim they have better product quality, but if you ask them, they would say, our cement is just like, our competitor's cement. It's the same stuff.
Right, so customer experience was a real differentiator.
So how can we be different than our competitors? And that's how they said the customer experience will be our key differentiator in a boring market like the cement industry.
Well, I think that
where you
shows
wouldn't
the
expect
strength.
this, right?
Exactly.
Everybody's talking about customer experience in consumer side. So how do you see that? I think that's an interesting question as well. When people talk about, that's also what I like about the example, people talk about customer experience and customer engagement, many times they think about consumers.
Right.
But it's also very relevant to B2B, isn't it?
Oh, it's incredibly relevant because you still have that relationship. The relationship, the B2B market might be a smaller number by individual entities that are included in B2B versus B2C. We all shop. Retail is a very, personable environment. We can all relate to the B2C environment. But B2B is relationships. It's a longer sales cycle. You need to know your customer. You need to really understand their business. You really need to understand how they want to do business. And in today's selling cycle, which even in B2B, a lot of the education happens long before you, the salesperson, are sitting at your desk and call them. There's a lot of opportunity that can be leveraged to create that relationship and have a positive customer experience. And it goes back to, the embedding of the culture on the website, right? Do I want to do business with this company? Do they have integrity? Those are all the things that come through, and while it's B2B, doesn't mean it's not important.
So and it's also people, right? Even in B2B, you're dealing with people, and even in they have their business role, but they're also consumers where they have their experiences and which shape their expectations.
Right.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Couple minutes left with you, Mary. Let's finish up with this.
I'm not done.
You talked culture, strategy, and process when it comes to customer experience. And you talked about points, the way you and IDC look at it when you think about customer experience. And before the show, you and I were talking about, I think you made a great point. When we're talking about the topic of this show, customer journey and many journeys and infinite possibilities, you brought up a great point that the journeys are your customers' journeys, your employees' journeys, correct? And your partners' journeys also.
Absolutely.
So I thought that was a great point, because when you think about your employees as customers, they're going on a journey themselves too, right?
Yep.
Expand on that a little bit.
So we've actually molded the way we talk about experiences to experiences. And under experiences, we talk about customer, employee, and partner. Partner also includes supplier, which that's a lot of level of nuance we won't go into now. But from the employee perspective, you have to think of the employee as being your brand ambassador. as are your partners, right? So this culture needs to come through the employees. You need to make them part of the brand experience. They need to be your advocates. You know, I can guarantee you if you mistreat your employees, they're not going to be very nice on the phone on the call center, right? So it even goes back to when you look at building that employee experience, now you're starting to talk about the HR system. Now talk about potentially a boring category, but your ability to recruit, hire, and retain the types of employees that will be your advocates is really important, right? And also for your employee to have the experience themselves as an employee that is fulfilling, right? It all goes into making them happy. And I know as I'm even listening to myself, it sounds all motherhood and apple pie, but it all goes into how the company presents themselves.
And so it's also about empowering your employees. We're talking about training, et cetera. So in the age of the empowered customer, that kind of creates this environment. It becomes even more important to empower your employees, whether it's through training or providing the right tools and enable them, because if you think about a customer service representative, they probably really want to help the people who have a problem. Sometimes they can't because the tools won't allow them, or you know, organizational structures or other guidelines. You know, you get to hang up the phone after 2 minutes in the call center. That doesn't help.
I think it really makes sense. I mean, what I've learned from what you're saying today is that the successful companies, when it comes to customer engagement, need a couple of things. They need to treat their employees like customers, because they are the ones on the line that are dealing with the customers. And then going right, excuse me, going right back to what you said about culture, strategy, and process. I think so many businesses focus on the process, and rightfully so, because you got to deliver. But if you don't have a strategy when it comes to customer experience, and it's not part of your culture, the process is going to fail. You can work as hard as you want. You need to work smarter, right?
Joey Benedretti, who is the U.S. president for CISPRO, which happens to be an ERP company, but they go to market on a customer experience strategy themselves. It's an ERP applications company. And he said his employees, he meets with every employee they're going to hire, and he looks for integrity in their customers. I mean, that's a whole nother level of really, and that's when I think culture, I think of Joey. He's amazing. But that's, you know, you get that embedded in the culture. Believe me, as a new employee, you're meeting with the U.S. president. What does that tell you as a new potential employee, right? This is serious stuff. And as he said, the doors should be wide on the way in, and it should be narrow on the way out. Or was it the other way around? Narrow on the way in, wide on the way out. Gosh, I've got to get my quotes straight.
She should be a little more passionate about all of this, shouldn't she?
Sorry.
Mary, thanks for your contributions to the show. Thanks for your time.